Pride and Prejudice. When I read this lesson for the first time in preparing for this week, it just popped in my head. I have not read the book, but it certainly is a story of, again, people trying to find meaning in life, and we're all trying to do that. And I think it will tie into the sermon as we go forward. But one thing I wanted to say about this lesson is that today is uniquely special for me because this is a lesson I would never have picked, ever have picked, if it hadn't been for the lectionary. And so sometimes it's good, and that's what's nice about the lectionary, all these readings that are prescribed for the year. It's sometimes good as a preacher to take on something you never would have taken on elsewise. And so I struggle a little bit about this message today, but we'll keep moving forward. One of the things that I picked up from the Bible studies this week, and it was really a strong call, particularly in the men's breakfast. I heard this a lot, and I also heard it in our Thursday morning Bible study, that this lesson particularly deals with the humility that we need to be people of faith, to invite people into our lives, to slow down and this type of thing. And I appreciated that. I really did. It was not the direction I was going in this sermon, and I'm not going to suggest it totally is yet. But I want to lift up the fact that humility is certainly a part of this story. And so I want to share this with you. I remember 6 years ago or so, I was at a Synod conference at Shalom Lutheran Church, a good name for a Lutheran church, I think, don't you? Shalom. Anyway, it's in Pinckney. And about 400 people were there. And the bishop of the National Church, Elizabeth Eaton, was to be there. And we were kind of waiting around. It was a drizzly day, and she hadn't arrived yet. And anyway, she drove up to the church, and she drove right to the driveway, and the people, the attendants there told her, there's no more parking spaces. You'll have to drive a third of a mile down, turn around and park, and then come in. Of course, they didn't know it was the bishop. And the bishop didn't say anything. She said, okay, I'll do it. So and that's the kind of person she can be. So anyway, she turns around and she parks, and it's a little drizzly. And she, as I recall, I was kind of there near the greeting area. I wasn't greeting her directly, but I was kind of peripheral to it all. And so she gets to the church, and I noticed that she was a bit wet, you know. I noticed she was wearing a dress and had nylons, which were properly mud spattered by then, and probably very nice shoes. That got pretty dirty as well. And the people, though, that were just shocked and horrified that this could have happened to their bishop. Oh my God, how did this happen? And she was just fine. She said, I just parked. And they said, didn't you tell them you were the bishop? She said, I don't know, I was thinking about something else at the time and thinking about something, so I just did what I was told. And she had brought in a trumpet or something. She was going to play in a quartet or something. I think actually Pastor Lauren was part of this as well, as I recall. Maybe Lauren played an instrument or something. But in any event, what I picked up was this incredible humility. And it was like no big deal at all. And I stood convicted. I think if it had been me, I would have maybe said, hey, I'm the bishop. You got to have a parking spot, which they did have for her. But it's interesting to see how people can measure their place in society and recognize what might be more important. Now, Jesus today, he is in Palestine. The atmospherics are this honor and shame motif. That's really what drives the culture of ancient Palestine. And honor was always a matter of wealth, privilege, the ability to have much leisure. Included in that may have been education. Included in that may have been, if you were Jewish, how connected you were to the Torah, how literate you were about the Torah, that you were able to share this with people. And if you and it was not only an individual orientation, but it was really a group orientation, that you were part of this group that had this type of honor. And of course, to be in shame was a little bit different. It was that you would not have any wealth. You would have to be very hardworking. You would basically be living in subsistence, and maybe you didn't practice the faith so much, which was the majority of Palestine at the time. Very poor, not particularly practicing the faith, maybe a little here and there, but generally just too tired and to really engage in much more than just work and a little bit of rest. And so this is the world. And in today's lesson, Jesus, the thing that I love about Jesus, I love studying how he operates, because I'm a very practical theologian. I want to talk about how do we actually functionally follow Jesus in everyday life. How does this work? Jesus gives us always wonderful examples, but in this case, he practices what is called the politics of co-optation. He is with Pharisees. He's with wealthy people. He understands exactly how they think, how they feel, and he is attempting, through the politics of co-optation, what we try to do is we try to take over a context, making it something new, something special, something more meaningful, actually taking something and converting it into a kingdom-like experience. Now, in this case, Jesus understands the honor piece of the people he is witnessing, and so he becomes a performance coach. He becomes a coach. He understands they want honor. And so he tells them a story about taking the last seat rather than the first. You want to, at all times, he suggests, to protect yourself from experiencing any type of shame. So if you go to the back, you're in a really good position to possibly move up. If you don't move up, you don't lose anything. Well, to hear this from Jesus, when you are a power player, you understand that he gets you. And he's not preaching at you, really. He's just coaching you. And I think that it set the stage for what happens next in this lesson. So anyway, now in our world, we still have honor and shame. It does carry over from the ancient world into the modern world. It's a little bit different. Our orientation is not so much group-based as it was in the day. It's more individual. We have the ability to individually do more things, to break out of certain kinds of situations and carve out lives for ourselves. We have a culture that celebrates individualism, so it's a very different type of thing. However, there still is this honor and shame thing that goes down in our society, and it influences people in a variety of different ways. I mean, certainly we can look at honor related to education. How much education does someone get? What kind of education? What schools did they go to? And there are certain schools that seem to be honored all the time, and other schools that aren't really thought much about at all. Well, in any event, people are influenced and touched by these types of situations, and it has an impact on how a person might see themselves in society. And it's not just education, it could be economic status, right? I mean, the more you have, the more, the better it is. Well, if you don't have a lot, you still have some of that, alienation going down. You're trying to just make it happen, but you recognize your place in society, and it may not be a place of much wealth, and so it has an impact on how we see things and how we do things. Vocation, same thing. Certain professions are exciting and lifted up all the time. Others aren't even mentioned or are to be avoided. We live in this culture, and we see how this culture can radically impact people who don't seem to fit into that honor-based mode. It's a struggle sometimes for people to have an identity that is celebrated by everyone. The good news about this church, the good news about the church period, is that we attempt to say all people are sacred, all people are valued, all these different things that we do vocationally, with respect to our education, with how we serve in the church and the community, it is all of deep, deep value. And know that you are loved, and know that God is with you every day in every way. Well, going back to this story, Jesus offers another story. He offers another suggestion to the guy who held the banquet. He says, instead of having a banquet like this, have a banquet with people who you think cannot repay you, the poor, the crippled, the blind, this type of things, widows and orphans. Bring them together and give them a meal. And of course, Jesus knows that if he does, he'll be repaid in all kinds of ways. He invites us to recognize that the way to the way is where people come together in such a way. And it's this lesson, I think, that the people, the early church, recognize, because that's exactly what's happening in the early church. The poor and the rich are coming together. The rich are bringing more food and these types of things, and they're gathering together throughout the ancient Near East. And this is the way the church is built. And this lesson certainly provides direction for the way. Now today, the way this works for us is there's a variety of different ways this works for us, but when I think about Lutheran World Relief and Patty and Bob Oates and the work that they do every year to encourage us to gather items for those who are in need, this is a demonstration of us slowing down and thinking about the other, and in some way duplicating the ancient church, that we're engaged in the needs of others, and we try to share that which we have with them. And this is an important thing. There's so many other causes and charities as well that can do this, so I invite you to think about that. The one I'm thinking about right now is Amparo. It is part of the ELCA, and Amparo in Spanish means protection of living creatures, to protect living creatures. And the challenge that we have in our world in North America is that in Central America, there are many people who are trying to flee these countries to escape a bad demise. And the church recognizes the social, economic, political kinds of things that are going down, the brokenness in these areas, and attempts to extend a type of helping hand to those who are refugees seeking either asylum or something else. How do we do this south of the border? How do we do this north of the border? How do we do this at the border? And it's important for us to recognize in our Lutheran tradition, it is the cornerstone of who we are. The Lutheran Church is known throughout the world as the greatest advocate for refugees. And it began back in the 1940s, where we resettled Palestinians who had to leave Israel. But in the end, what we have, my friends, is an opportunity, each one of us in our own ways, to recognize that this humility, this downward, this slowing down, to see how we can extend our ministry to others is significant, and to become aware of how pride and prejudice can work, to become aware of not being so enamored with the rich and the beautiful and the fast and this type of thing, but to be more aware of those on the margins, those who need the loving touch of God. And with that, I'll just say amen.